Alright, I figured out why the learning episodes for this month were so messed up. I somehow lost the last episode, and I will either re record it or find it, and it will be the bonus episode for. And that will air. There'll be the next bonus episode, and that will air the next month with 5 Wednesdays on it. Anyway, I look forward to talking about that one because that's where I explain hyperlearning, jumpstart learning, condensing the speed of learning, and all of that fun stuff. So look forward to it, and it'll air eventually.
Welcome to the Principles of Success. My name is Nathan, and this is Season 1, Episode 12. And today I wanted to start off with talking about embracing change. A great example of this is my grandpa's, to be precise. One of them took advantage of this new thing called computers, and he made a lot of money learning how to be tech support. This was back before we outsourced it all. My other grandpa can barely turn on his own TV at this point because everything has gotten way too far advanced for him, and he never worried about figuring it all out. If grandpas, if you're watching this, sorry to point you out. But you have to be able to embrace change. We're going through a lot of changes all the time. We're in rapid acceleration. You have to run to just stand still in how fast we are moving forward. So you have to keep learning. Embrace the change. Keep learning the new stuff. A great example of this is I run a marketing agency, and I specifically run Facebook advertisements. Now I am slowly shifting over to newer marketing platforms because eventually, not right now, that'll become less efficient. Just like for a time, mailing somebody was the most efficient. And then emailing somebody was the most efficient. And then Google Ads was the most efficient. Now Facebook is the most efficient. Eventually, something else will be more efficient. So if I don't keep learning the different platforms, keep learning the different ways we communicate, then eventually I will become irrelevant because I have not kept up with our ever-evolving technology. So embrace the change, keep moving forward, because staying the same just doesn't work. Next thing I want to talk to you about is investing in yourself, investing your time, investing your energy, investing your money in learning. Successful people spend a great portion of their day learning. I'll talk about that in the last episode. They will spend a good portion of their time learning and growing, and they'll spend a large sum of money. We're 3 months into the year, and I have spent more money on education than all of my other expenses combined. My car isn't even worth as much as I've spent on education just these first 3 months. So I put my money where my mouth is. I just bought a $700 course just a couple of weeks ago. So successful people are willing to pay to propel themselves forward. Like I was talking about last week, learning from others shrinks that time. I would much rather pay $1,000 to learn how to make $10,000 and do that in a few months than spend 10 years trying to figure out how to make $10,000. Now, I'm not saying get rich quick schemes. There's no such thing. But I am willing to learn the skills like I learned marketing. I bought multiple courses on marketing and sales. I bought courses on social skills to improve my ability to communicate. I'm willing to spend a lot of money to make sure that I have the information and the resources I need to propel myself forward. I'm also willing to put in the time. Not everybody has a bunch of money. When I was first starting out, I definitely did not have a bunch of money. In fact, I still don't have a bunch of excess money. Most of my money goes to things that I deem very important. You gotta put in the time. Go through, like I was talking about the other day, go through all of those free videos. A lot of them will be useless. A lot of them will be great information. I was in a state of hyperlearning, which we'll talk about more next week. And I learned all sorts of crazy stuff last week with my hyperlearning. So put in the time, make sure that you spend an adequate amount of time. The average CEO reads 50 plus books a year. That is about a book a week, and a book is generally, for most people, you can read a book in a week if you take about a half an hour to an hour each day. That's a decent chunk of time, but an episode is 45 minutes. So most of you are willing to watch an episode. The successful are willing to do the things that the unsuccessful are not. And one of those is reading a book, watching educational videos, listening to podcasts. So you're already one step ahead. But you got to do those things. You got to spend a decent chunk of your time. And back to the bonus episode, make sure that that information is beneficial. I enjoy the news. The news doesn't do much. I don't learn anything from the news other than something that's going to be irrelevant in a few weeks. So that goes back to priorities. Remember, they're all connected. And keep it simple. You don't have to go off on a major tangent like I do sometimes and try and figure out how to make salt out of beets. I did that last week. Actually, I did that this week. It's been a long week. I did that 2 days ago. I tried to figure out... No, it was Saturday. I tried to figure out how to make salt out of beets. Because reasons. But you don't have to go into super complex stuff. Hone in on what you want and simplify it. Once you know the subject, try and simplify it as much as you can for the next person. That's another great way to really learn the material is, you learn more when you teach it to somebody else. Because when you try and teach it to somebody else, you realize the holes in your knowledge. I've been learning plenty from doing this podcast. Great example is I think I'm getting better at this improv thing. The first season 0 was rough, and the first several episodes of this was rough, and I'm slowly getting better, not counting the bonus episode. The bonus episode was rough as well. So simplify it, teach it to others, and be self-aware. You got to know your strengths and weaknesses. Some people recommend only focusing on your strengths. And there's good logic behind that, because you might suck at basketball, and if you work really, really hard, you might get decent at basketball. Whereas somebody who's really good at basketball, if they work really, really hard, might go to the NBA. That's just an example. But I don't think that always fits. Great example is I was one of the most shyest, poorly communicating, weird, autistic individuals you will have ever met. But over the last 8 years now, I've been working on those social skills and improving them, that at this point, most people can't even tell I'm autistic. Most people don't believe me when I say I'm naturally super shy. And I'm able to spot social cues, which I could not do before. So I fully believe in strengthening your weaknesses. Doesn't mean I strengthen all of my weaknesses. Back to the basketball example. I'm tall, I'm 6'2", but I really suck at basketball. At this point, I don't even bother playing basketball because I know how bad I am. If I wanted to, I could improve it, but I'm not too worried about it. So, for the most part, if you want to grow and become exceptionally good at something, focus on your strengths. But if you really suck at something and it's detrimental to your success, to your happiness, then I really do think that you should work on it, and work on it passionately. And you gotta be humble. You gotta make sure that you can't be very self-aware if you're not humble. You gotta be, and humility is willing to learn be willing to admit that you don't know. Those are all examples of humility. And actually, I'm going to look up the definition real quick. I dislike Google's definition of humility. I think humility is being willing to admit that somebody else might know more and be willing to listen to their guidance. Google says humility is a modest or low view of one's own importance. I think I'm very important. I also think I'm extremely humble. I'm willing to listen from anybody and learn from anybody. So I guess I'm using the word wrong, but my ego says that Google is wrong. So be willing to learn from anybody, and be willing to go with the flow, embrace the change. And I think I'm going to call it there, and I will see y'all next week.